We are excited to be back in the black hole of real estate podcast space, kicking off 2024 with some ideas and thoughts about what to expect in the real estate market ahead for the next year. And really, really good to be back in this space. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that 2023 was a year like we haven't seen in such a long time. The market almost balanced itself out, created some competition between the buyer and seller side of the business. We saw some lawsuits, which may or may not have a long-term effect. We'll see. But my suspicion is the market we see in 2024 might feel a little bit better than 23, but be different at the very same time because there is an evolution that's occurring in the real estate space, and it's not abnormal. And if you look back over history, there have been many layers of evolving. It wasn't that long ago, 10 years ago, you barely saw anything online. There wasn't hardly anything but virtual showings and virtual tours and all the things that happen in real time. And the advent of the internet agent, it's happened quickly. So with that in mind, what are the hot button issues that we are facing as we go into the next year? Well, it has been an issue for a long time, and it's the inventory piece. There's very few properties available for someone to purchase. And at this point, we all understand that if we're going to sell our home, it's likely to sell pretty fast, and we'll have limited selection and opportunity for the next property that we want. So many people have taken a reverse approach and bought the next house first, moved into it, and then sold the house that they were living in, and that was worked out for many. And if you have the ability to do that, that might be the best way to do it in this market. An alternative approach is to sell your property and rent short term, put your stuff in storage, which could be stressful and painful, or it could be really good if you're planning a 30-day trip or something like that. So there's advantages to both sides. What continues to be the hardest thing is to time out the move in such a way that you're closing on the home you're selling in the morning, and then for a few hours you're homeless until you finish the closing on the one you're buying, as the funds are all traveling back and forth. And that's still the vast majority of choice made by the people doing this right now. It's what's most common. And it works. And the stresses will come along the way, but what I find is somewhere along the line, people forget the stress they went through. They're just happy they got in the home that they got into. And it's what you go through in the moment. Those 30 or 60 days of trepidation and moving is uncomfortable inherently. And when you add in the layers of mortgage approvals and inspections and anything else that might go sideways, it's going to be just additional pressure on those involved in the process. And that hasn't really changed. So no news there. So inventory, it's going to be an issue for the next year. Will it increase? We've all felt it would. It just hasn't happened yet. Now, the interest rate piece, it spiked. We know that it spiked, and it spiked hard. I mean, we were looking at 2s and 3s, and all of a sudden 7s and 8s. And those mortgage rate shifts, they happen suddenly. And we've often said that it takes about 18 months for it to resolve back to where it was. We're pretty close to it. And the first 3 times in recorded financial history, if you will, in the real estate space, that happened. This being the 4th one, we'll see. We're on the cusp of that taking a little longer than the other ones have taken, but it's not out of bounds just yet. There's been a lot of sentiment, and certainly here. If you went back, you'd say that, hey, Ryan, you pointed out that somewhere around election time, the rates would start to drop, and they did. Now, maybe not as much as I might have anticipated, but they did slow and then ease and then drop. And we've seen that. And I believe you'll see step ladder dropping occurring between now and November of 2024. And why wouldn't? It's politically good for rates to go down. It's politically good for the economy to kick in during that time. And maybe all the changes that have been made nationwide, well, maybe they're also happening at a time where, I don't know if it's willed to happen. Maybe it's taken too long for it to happen, but there is some indication that things might be getting a little bit better on rates, maybe a lot. I can't speak to the economy. That's not really my space to see that, but hopefully things pick up right now. But with the real estate space being quiet, it definitely affects so many more industries. And I believe that as we look at interest rates, that's going to be the big piece right now. It's like, all right, how do we get those rates in a better place so that the rest of the businesses that are related to the real estate industry also get kicked in? And I think that kickstart is what we're looking for economically. And while real estate is not necessarily a saving grace of the economy, it's a really big piece, and it affects so many other areas that it's likely to help as real estate gets better and busier. It should help another bunch of areas, maybe a snowball effect. And this time of year, we all like snowballs, right? That might be a really good thing. So that's, the two leading indicators I'm looking at right now is where's the inventory going and where are the interest rate going. Those are the drivers right now. We know that people are moving to areas where there's less state income taxes and better weather and better opportunities and industry and jobs. That hasn't changed. That has a lot of people heading to Florida, Texas, states like that, and exiting some other high tax places where it's been really difficult to give up that much of your earned income at the state level. I mean, the Fed's taken off as well, so it's not news. It's not an opinion. It's a fact. If somebody can move to an area and pay 10% less state tax because there isn't any, that's attractive to a lot of people, and it will continue to be that. On the agent side, hey, there was a lawsuit last year that, had a lot of people nervous, and I think it makes sense to at least pay attention to it. For years and years, there's been a certain commission that's been negotiated, and it's never one fixed percent. We know that. And it's been negotiated for years, and it can be a range of numbers between this and that. That's about as far as I'll go on that piece. And it's typically been shared, between the brokerage that has the listing and the brokerage that brings the buyer. It's been shared, and those percentages have been worked out. So I'm not about to get in a price fixing conversation. There's been a range, there's been a negotiation, and everything's negotiable, and there's been sharing. Well, now the lawsuit is suggesting that maybe that needs to be altered in some way in fairness, and we'll see. But it does have a number of people thinking that if they're working with buyers, how will they be compensated? Will the buyer suddenly be the one to compensate them? Or will there be some sort of a credit at closing to help the buyer pay their agent from the seller? It looks a lot like the closing costs concessions to help buyers actually get into a home, because maybe they use most or all of their money on the down payment. They need help with the closing costs. Maybe it just stays the same. Maybe cooler heads prevail and say this has worked a really long time, and maybe it can just keep going on. I've not read the lawsuit. I'm aware that there's one out there. I'm aware it's changed some things in the dynamics, and it's people nervous. But maybe something that's worked a long time really well. I think if we look at anything, you can have one or two instances where probably something didn't go exactly as it should have or planned, and I don't know if there's room within the law to allow for that. I just don't. It's not where I want to spend my time or my expertise. And my focus has always been to help to educate and inform and help others in the process of either buying or selling property or moving or investing. And I think I want to stay on that tack and do really well at that piece. I think it's going to be all right. We'll see. Whatever it is, things change, things evolve, and the market and the agents and the people working in the industry, they'll adjust whatever is decided, completely out of my hands. So I'm going to take that out of something that I'm going to spend a lot of time on, because it's simply out of my control. What I can control is sharing information with all of you on the short-term rental area. That's been a big change this year. There's studies that have shown that the money brought in from short-term rentals is down in a neighborhood of 38%. Now, I feel free to fact check that, but it's a big number. And there's reasons for it to go down. Maybe the hotels got a little more competitive, and so they were losing a lot of money to short-term rentals of individuals versus, let's say, the hotels and the convention centers and all the places that have, these rooms available for rent in big buildings, right? So I think that's playing into it. I also think that perhaps as the rents changed a little bit, there was less travel. It was people were euphoric, they were traveling, and they were trying all these Airbnb places out, short-term rental places, and it was good. I think there's less of that right now, just because the economy's changed. There's less disposable income to do those sort of a trip. So naturally, there'd be less of it to go around. I also think some of the owners that have short-term rental properties might have overdone things a little bit. And if you stayed in a short-term rental property, it's different than a hotel. At a hotel, I mean, you kind of just pack up, take your stuff, and leave, right? You might throw the towels in a bathtub. You might leave them on the floor. There's no charge. They're not going to charge you an extra $50 on your room rate because you didn't clean up after yourself. Well, I do believe that in the short-term rental game, I've witnessed it. Sometimes you've got to list 10 or 15 items. Take out the trash. Do this. Turn this way. Make sure you dust. Make sure you do this. And I'm not saying they're wrong, but part of travel and paying a fair amount of money for a room is convenience. And if you're delayed getting on the road by an hour or so because you're cleaning up somebody else's place where you paid the rent, I think some people have taken notice that, what, prices are similar, and the experience is similar. Not the same, but similar. I might like the easy button of just getting out the door and not having to worry about it, so I can get on the road and get back to my vacation and doing the things I want. How much time do I want to spend cleaning while I'm on my trip? So it's something to pay attention to. If you have a short-term rental, I might just take a look. What are we asking our customers, the renters, and those short-terms? What are we asking them to do? And is it something that you would sign up for? If think of your customer experience. What if it was your experience? Would you like your own set of rules? And I think it's a really good governing tool for yourself. If your rules are such that you wouldn't like them yourself, that should be an indication to you that maybe we should revisit that. Maybe you've got it just dialed in and just perfect. You haven't suffered on there, but between competition with hotels, less travel, and choices involving easier paths on the entry and the exit, I would look at that. Those are the things I think are going to move this market, whether it's inventory or interest rates, the inflation, political climate, the elections, all of those things, and the investment property game. Those will be the big ticket items going throughout 2024. And my suspicion is something. There's going to be one thing that's just going to hit us a little bit crazy. Maybe there'll be continuation of this lawsuit. Maybe that thing goes away. But something else is going to happen this year that nobody's seeing. And that's where it gets fun. And that's why I look forward to catching up with you every week to let you know what I'm seeing in the market and maybe look around corners just a little bit so we know what's coming. All right, this is Ron Wojciechowski for the Black Hole of Real Estate.